Hello friends, first of all let me thank Fipresci India for giving me this award. I am deeply honored and humbled, and it was totally unexpected, but of course I am delighted. I am going to talk about the portrayal of women in Indian cinema. I am mostly talking about Hindi cinema and specifically a few films that have been pretty recent and haven't been written about much like many of the Bollywood hits, and couple of iconic old films from which have had an influence on a continuum of cinema. And now to the paper. The women portrayed on the Indian screen jostle for attention under a gigantic circus tent. Archetypes and stereotypes stand in a hall of many mirrors. Distortion is inevitable in the images they reflect. They reveal deep fissures of our collective cultural schizophrenia. This schizophrenia is most apparent in the way women are perceived and portrayed, most so in the context of tradition versus modernity. This context has changed over the years and the conflict takes on new aspects. The crippling combination of Brahminical Puritanism and Victorian prudery makes the issue of women's sexuality acutely problematic. Popular cinema evades the problem through double standards, hypocrisy, and judgmental orthodoxy. Cinema largely continues to cater to the male gaze and objectifies the woman. An essential part of cinema's promise of visual pleasure, she was stripped of Indic culture's celebration of sensuousness. These images need re-examination for relevance through both historical and contemporary lens. Globalization is the newest lens that captures the complexity of the impact. The coming of globalization was both an economic and cultural force that deeply affected our society. Economists might declare globalization dead, but cultural globalization is an undeniable fact of society that simultaneously lives in different centuries. Cultural globalization is a genie that can't be bottled back once it is released. Bollywood is the most obvious example of cultural globalization's impact. Certain orthodoxies are crumbling under the weight of feminist assertion of a woman's autonomy over her body and sexuality. The received wisdom of feminist critique of the media is the all-prevailing male gaze. It's time to move on from the set definition because there is also the female and homoerotic gaze that is part of the viewing process. For consumers of visual pleasure, cinema panders to complex demands. The sculpted male body offered to frenzied fans, both male and female. Salman Khan's shirtless state is a must in every film. Now Tiger Shroff offers a younger body. It also feeds the narcissism of male stars flaunting six-pack abs. The male gaze seems to have come full circle, but only superficially, because you don't see the camera splintering the male body into so many body parts as it does to the actresses, be it a starlet or a superstar. A few filmmakers are apologetic for such deliberate titillation, but one can't assume they are speaking for the industry as a whole. The excesses of the past are on the decline, thankfully so. Bollywood carries the heft of India's soft power. It may be unacknowledged by culture theorists, but its growing presence even in non-traditional markets and the respectability conferred by academia is validation enough. Bollywood has outgrown its adolescent angst to step out as a confident adult. Now, Bollywood is a global brand that endorses other brands, looking for means to brand itself anew in response to the new challenge. We are often guilty of dismissing it as mindless entertainment. Cinema has to evolve beyond escapism to survive in a world brimming over with alternate, edgy content that you can see on your smartphone. That is the incentive for Bollywood to move with the zeitgeist. Globalization has seen the zeitgeist change at a pace never felt before. What took a couple of generations earlier now happens in less than a decade. Never before have we lived in such a connected world. In the pre-internet and satellite television days, popular cinema filtered changes leisurely. Globalization, when it entered our media space, provoked two contradictory reactions. Superficially, westernization of the Indian woman's look changed almost irreversibly. It coincided with the entry of the international cosmetic industry, aiming to flatter the brown skin. Indian models regularly winning Miss World and Miss Universe titles widened the market. The voluptuous female body that is familiar from classical literature and sculpture was not suitable for Western clothes that became the norm. Size 0 was the new aspiration of the. In a long shot, you could not tell the popular actresses of the 90s apart. Slim, aerobicized bodies in tight jeans and clingy short dresses were the uniform. This filtered into all media images. Take TV anchors of both English and almost all Indian languages. The traditional sari of the 80s and 90s gave way to business suits and jackets in the new millennium. But as I said, there was a visceral reaction at a deeper level that was both instinctive and market savvy. It was defensive and protective of Indian cultural norms. Take the blockbusters of the early 90s. The triumphant trio Dilwale Dulhania, Maine Pyar Kiya, Hum Aapke Hai Kaun celebrated family values and tradition over the claims of young love. The iconic Raj and Simran continue to be invoked and referenced. The besotted lovers are adamant that they will unite only with the father's approval. The girl's hand has to be bestowed by the father, a cherished position to be passed on into another man's keeping. This reassertion of Indian patriarchal culture and its values was Bollywood's answer to combat the threat of indiscriminate westernization. The result would be alienation from our roots and cultural deracination. This argument refutes Indian civilization's assimilative capacity. The syncretic culture that evolved over the centuries attests to this vitality. This perceived threat coincided with the rise of militant Hindutva, politically and culturally. Hindutva espoused the supremacy of Hindus. It sought to homogenize a people divided by ethnic, linguistic, and cultural differences into a monolithic group. It was to take on India's perceived other, the minorities. Christians are regarded as agents and disseminators of Western culture. Muslims are the hated invaders who subjugated Hindus. It's a historic memory that is not allowed to fade with time. They are reviled as hate objects. Hindutva exponents made no effort to hide their political agenda and tried to infiltrate media to further this end through the garb of cultural nationalism. The humongous success of Bollywood hits of the 90s speak of its acquiescence too, if not complicity with cultural Hindutva. Religious, cultural and political Hindutva culminated in the demolition of the Babri Masjid. The consequent triumphalism resulted in unapologetic majoritarianism. In its wake came love jihad, anti-Valentine Day, journal vigilantism and regular targeting of the minorities in every media. The attempt to impose a homogeneous culture continues. This is because we are getting mixed messages. Soft Hindutva and assertion of Hindu family values from the Rajashri brand of films. Against this, the fascination that popular series like Friends and Sex and the City exerted on large sections of young and not so young audiences. They were exposed to the multiplicity of choice offered by the magical set-top box and now by streaming platforms. Something even more radical happened in 2003. Mahabanu Modi Kotwal staged Eve Ensler's vagina monologues in Bombay to the utter shock of regular English theatre patrons. Well known names were proud to be part of the ensemble cast. Initially, audiences did not know how to react, but over time, the shock wore off. The words shouted from the stage were no longer taboo, it was part of female vocabulary. Since then, Modi Kotwal has taken English and modified Hindi versions of the play to major metros and small cities. Vagina monologues became part of the young women's education. It can be this generation's simplified equivalent to the second sex and the female eunuch. Significantly, this was not confined to the English speaking elite of the big cities. Taking the Hindi version of this radicalizing play to smaller towns gave women there a chance to have a conversation about a taboo subject. Bollywood has altered its narrative to capitalize on the new reality of the urban educated woman. The adventurous breed of indie filmmakers has energized Bollywood with the surprising success of films that tweaked popular genres like the rom-coms. This revamped genre featured an equal, if not more prominent role for the woman. Just look back at the success of Band Baja Barat, Salam Namaste, Hum Tum, Love Aajkal, Jab We Met, Two States, Shubh Mangal Shavdhan, Dam Laga Ke Hai Shah, Kareeb Kareeb Single, and so many others. Rom-coms are the fail-safe formula, and the more empowered heroine was not just a novelty. Unnoticed by the larger society, the presence of working women and their influence on consumption has made inroads into interconnected industries, cinema, television, and advertising. The millennial woman is familiar in urban India. The scene is changing in small town and semi-urban places. Thomas Friedman, in his book, The World is Flat, underlines the presence of young women flocking to the metros and living on their own. The heady taste of new independence can be seen in their self-confidence and assertion of agency. I emphasize that this is true of a minuscule demographic group of a huge population, but their visibility and influence belie the numbers. Women at work are a new feature. The profession the heroine chose was close to cinema in a way. Women journalists drove the narrative. No One Killed Jessica, Page 3, Lakshya, PK, Wake Up Sid, Satyagrah portray women as star anchors and on-the-ground reporters. They take their profession seriously, as do films where they play doctors, lawyers, police officers, media executives, etc. The film industry welcomes women professionals, not just female actors. Directors, a horde of assistant directors, producers, script and dialogue writers, lyricists, editors, cinematographers, production managers, PR and marketing experts, and even a gaffer. Gayatri Rangachari Shah and Malika Kapoor profiled a range of women working in the industry. The title, Change Makers, 20 Women Transforming Bollywood behind the scenes, is self-explanatory. The feminist collective does not seem to attract this generation to political and ideological activism, except for causes like the environment. They have been apolitical most of the time. The accusation of Bollywood's apolitical stance was shaken by the support gained by student protests in JNU and Jamia. Deepika Padukone, silently standing beside an injured Aisha Ghosh, who had her arm in a sling and bandaged head, spoke more than any passionate speech. The highest paid female star standing in solidarity with students just before her new woman-centric film released is something to be remembered. The image was eloquent of woman power. Bollywood held one of the largest protest meetings in Bombay in support of the Shaheen Bagh sit-ins. India rediscovered Faiz Ahmed Faiz, and Hum Dekhenge became the anthem of dissent. But COVID and the government snuffed out the anti-CAA movement. Though it was brief, the involvement of the Me First generation was encouraging. We see the change reflected in Bollywood. The more exciting seminal films have been about women with new actors who have broken free of a mouldering stereotype. This rise in content driven entertaining films with the woman at the heart of the narrative has been steady and significant. Indie filmmakers are alive to the change. They made an engaging Queen and the non-conformist The Dirty Picture, or subversive cult films like Devdi. Indie directors have a vision and sensibility that is influenced by world cinema. They use mainstream elements of song, dance, melodrama with finesse and bring deeper understanding of young people caught in the flux of change. So we have Pink, Thappad, Kahani, Piku, and many other such films that rock the boat. Millennials, both men and women, have aspirations that are influenced by the West, and yet there is a desire to be rooted in Indian culture. The enemy of alienation is frightening for the young of a society that has grown up in the suffocating embrace of authoritative patriarchy and the safety net of an extended family. The instinct to have a rooted identity is often not given the importance it merits because of modernity's dazzling allure. It is perhaps one of the reasons why the young voted overwhelmingly for Narendra Modi's second term, because he personified further converted pride in being Indian, more particularly being Hindu. A disquieting trend that negates the secular ideals so many liberals hold as the fundamental principle of Indian democracy. The pervasive upper caste Hindu ethos of blockbusters old and new is undeniable, yet films are bringing in change. After parallel cinema's high watermark, it is the portrayal of millennials that is testing the limits of departure from formulaic storytelling. Even though the film industry continues to be male dominated, the representation of women in films has become truer of changing social and cultural realities. Even Ekta Kapoor, the TV Zarina, who made Saas Bahu unending sagas the ruling genre, has produced non-formulaic films, Diwakar Banerjee's Love, Sex or Dhoka, Milan Luthria's The Dirty Picture that made Vidya Balan a huge star. Kapoor backed the release of Lipstick Under My Burqa when a hidebound censor chief tried to ban it in India after the film won accolades abroad. Call it a canny producer's instinct for backing a potential blockbuster. But this is happening with establishment giants like Yashraj Films too. The banner that celebrated the chiffon pallu flirting with colorful sweaters in Swiss meadows now produces the largest number of rom-coms with a difference. Premarital sex, live-in relationships that were once taboo are integrated into the narrative without any fuss. And the woman is the more commitment phobic partner in these relationships. There have never been so many women directors in Bollywood earlier. Gauri Shinde debuted with English Winglish, and the diva Sridevi came back to the screen. It was unthinkable even a decade ago to make a stay-at-home mother of two the protagonist. She works hard to learn spoken English, to win the respect of her husband and daughter, who are dismissive of her lack of fluency in English. Zoya Akhtar crossed over into a league of her own with Gully Boy, the slum to celebrity story of a rap singer. Meghna Gulzar's Razi is a sensitive story of a Kashmiri young woman who spied for the country by marrying into a Pakistani military family. Gulzar made it a humanistic story where the other side of the border is not demonized as Bollywood tends to, catering to the hyper-nationalism that is so rampant today. Nandita Das's Firak and Manto are experiments with narratives that explore the fear of the vulnerable when communal violence stalks divided societies. Freedom to choose is the unwritten demand echoed in films. Choice is the underlying theme of Lapata Ladies, the unlikely Oscar entry. Kiran Rao invokes the spirit of middle cinema, a compromise between mainstream and parallel narratives. Lapata Ladies transcends the self-imposed boundaries of middle cinema. Middle of the road cinema used the familiar tropes of music, mild melodrama, and start to sell sensible stories to engage the viewer. Middle cinema avoided both mainstream crassness and esoteric aesthetics of the art house film. Kiran Rao avoids the glamorous veneer of indie cinema and uses gentle persuasion for a non-preachy feminist film. It gradually builds up the growing self-awareness and emerging sense of identity of village young women caught in dire situations. We experience the awakening feminist consciousness of two brides who reach wrong destinations. The two young brides, Fool and Jaya, live in a remote hinterland where catching a train involves an arduous journey by foot, ferry, and bus. They too are millennial women under a ghungat who find their own voice. Rao's charming narrative has fresh actors, no stars, and engaging humor. The feminist message that she is an individual who can voice her needs is not imposed from above. The non-condescending way it portrays the plight of Fool and Jaya makes an improbable situation plausible. Jaya is a runaway from marriage to a bully, and she has more autonomy. She is set upon studying organic farming. She finds the lost bride and unites her with the lovelorn husband. Fool is the naive innocent who ends up on a railway platform of a station where hardly more than a couple of trains stop. She is befriended by a lovable urchin. What changes Fool, who can't even remember the name of her husband's village, is the bracing, no-nonsense attitude of Manju Mai. She is the feisty, middle-aged woman who runs the tea stall. She is not a patron of freeloaders, and Fool takes the initiative to make mithai, to help out and earn her keep. She wistfully says, "I hope my husband will accept me after the forced separation." You have to accept him for carelessly leaving you behind, is Manju Mai's acerbic rejoinder. That's the second step in Fool's sense of self-worth. All's well that ends well. Fool and Jaya succeed because their optimism isn't crushed by circumstances. They are resourceful in a crisis. Indie cinema has shaped Bollywood for the better. Anurag Kashyap, Vishal Bharadwaj, Diwakar Banerjee, Vikramaditya Motwane, Hansal Mehta, Anubhav Sinha are all authors who made a difference to contemporary Hindi cinema. They are refreshingly unafraid to explore new narratives and themes. I must add an exciting new woman author to this distinguished list. Anvita Dutt has not had box office success, but her films demand detailed critical appraisal. Conventional wisdom is that filmmakers think in images and writers think in words. It is a felicitous fusion when a director thinks in images suffused with surreal poetry, and she is also the screenplay writer and lyricist. The best crucible of creativity makes magic happen. The magic maker of Anvita Dutt's two films have left the audience floating on a sea of enthrallment, while disturbing undertows pull you into depths of anger and despair. Kala and Bulbul are unique, each a minor masterpiece in its own way. They are real and yet limn with fantasy that is not escapist but subversive. Subversion that is subtly hinted at and then turns brutally violent. That shows a mastery of narrative finesse in two very different genres. Kala and Bulbul adopt immersive storytelling through artful color saturation to convey a host of meaning beyond words. Music and silence, apparent opposites, complement each other to add another dimension. Stunning, surreal, disturbing, one searches for adjectives to describe her films. They are grounded in reality, but phantom winds fly the narrative to supernatural realms. The supernatural of the Chudail, the demon woman, is the myth spun with delicate precision by a wronged woman. The supernatural validates an abused woman's vengeance. Bulbul's color saturation creates a palpable texture, rich in subtext and literary association. The tale of the child bride married to a much older zamindar set in 1881 is the Indian illustration of the hidden, dangerous core embedded in a fairy tale. Fairy and folk tales carry a local habitation and name, but share a similar structure across countries and cultures. Bruno Bettelheim's analysis of the hidden cautionary message of the simple children's story in his seminal book, The Uses of Enchantment, works for Bulbul too. The violence under the period charm lurks like a prowling shadow to shatter the languorous, sensuous texture of a film that lulls you into enjoying the lush visuals. It draws you into the enchanting world of a young girl's love for scary stories. Her fascination for fairy tales grows into awareness of the fearsome darkness underneath. Then comes the subversion by modern myth demystifiers. I would call the eponymous Bulbul hero for her courage and determination to kill all the abusive men she meets in her cloistered world. She recalls the iconic women of Bengali literature and cinema, Binodini and Charulata. Bulbul, the child bride, mistakes Satya, a boy little older than herself, to be her husband. But she is married to the much older Indranil, a zamindar with a mentally challenged, identical twin. Both share a streak of sadistic violence under the seeming difference of intelligence. 20 years later, Satya and Bulbul are inseparable, writing a book together. It's an echo of the literary companionship edged with competitive spirit between Charu and Amal in Charulata. The jealous husband sends Satya off to London to study law and then leaves home. Bulbul preens as the Thakurine of the manor. Satya can't reconcile the self-assured Bulbul to the younger girl who saw in him a playmate come mentor and was in love with him. She is now close friends with Sudeep, the cultured, perceptive doctor. He is the forerunner of the Renaissance man who brought reform to the feudal orthodoxy that ruled Bengal. All that foreign education hasn't taught Satya to treat an adult woman as an equal. That tells the story with many flashbacks, slowly building up to the horror of Indranil mercilessly beating up Bulbul. And then, when she is immovable in bed, her wounded feet bandaged and tied to the bedpost, the maniacal, leering twin rapes her. We know who is killing evil men from the signature red mist enveloping the forest. News of men mysteriously killed by the Chudail dwelling on trees is a feminist fable touched with horror. Rationalist though he is, Satya believes there is a Rakshas haunting the forest, while the good doctor believes it is a Devi dispensing justice. We return to the old trope of a woman having to be either a demon or a Devi in her rape revenge mission. The climax is visually spectacular in the midst of red clouds and raging fire, but the gorgeous visuals can't mask the rather weak writing here. Thus, narrative power sweeps along to the rhythm of Amit Trivedi's score. Finally, it's a strong feminist message, and it's conveyed through associative symbols used inventively. Red symbolizes violence and murder, passion and creation, worship and adoration. The film packs the power of a reinvented folk tale. Kala is a total departure stylistically from Bulbul's lushness. It is mostly in shades of grey. The cinematography favors German expressionism to underline the exploitative nature of the film music scene of the 30s and 40s Calcutta. It was the capital of the powerful gramophone record business that could make stars of unknowns. The spine of the narrative is the poignant story of the aspiring singer Kala and her troubled relationship with her mother, a well-known Thumri singer in her prime. The latter is a diva, She is voluptuous and can seduce men with her eyes and voice. Kala is timid, her self-confidence frayed to tatters by the demanding mother who withholds both affection and approval. Dutt uses flashbacks fluidly. Amit Trivedi's music, vocals and background score meld seamlessly into the dark narrative, a stark graph of the mental illness unrecognized by those around Kala till it is too late. Her mental illness pushes her into an abyss of jealousy and guilt when she is at the peak of her career. The cinematography brings an unexpected touch of gothic horror to Dutt's most assured film, where script and images come together for a deliberately dissonant narrative. Dissonance has a dark rhythm, echoing the noise in Kala's head. The director masters asymmetric symmetry. The dissonance is appropriate because we understand what is happening to Kala without identifying with her. The challenge of creating a character with whom the audience does not identify and yet absorbs you into an engaging story is very tough. The film leaves you searching for adjectives. It's dark and lyrical in snatches. What emerges from this orchestration of contrarian voices is a strong original female voice that is unafraid to blend opposites, to be delicately feminine and fiercely female. This fusion of connotations that words bring in their wake, feminine is delicate and even manipulative, female is search for power and asserting it. Dutt is this unique voice who combines these two aspects. She has the cinematic skill to convey ambiguity and find the right image for the words. And music that glides from harmony to dissonance is like a maestro's. Unlike Kala's tortured mother-daughter relationship, Darlings is a noir comedy where a docile wife and her down-to-earth mother get their revenge. Set in a Bombay chawl built around a quadrangle, Shefali Shah is the widowed mother who disapproves of her daughter's submissive acceptance of her abusive husband. His coercion is couched in endearments. How Alia Bhatt discovers her crushed spirit and plots a satisfyingly sadistic revenge makes for a delightful subversion of marriage. It's a small film powered by fine performances, authenticity of milieu, and humor that scales up to include torturing the torturer. It also pricks the balloon of Muslim women's perceived compliance with marital abuse. This kind of narrative range is precisely indie cinema's distinctive mark. We find echoes of parallel cinema's way of making the woman the focus and metaphor for resonance beyond the narrative. There are daring departures too to imbue generic films with unsuspected depth. There is a continuum in film history. Departures of narrative don't exist in a vacuum. There is a link to an archetype and a subversive rebel of the past. Yes, Mother India and Dunyana Mane are looming presences in cinema. From Mother India to Badhai Ho is a revealing journey. The most enduring images of women of Hindi cinema flow from two fountainheads, the archetypal mother and the rebel looking for a cause. Radha of Mother India occupies the highest place in the pantheon. Sita and Savitri as the epitome of selfless wifely devotion yield place to the mother who becomes the site of nationalism. Ironically, she is the matriarch who upholds dharma that is basically patriarchal. She is a deified archetype. Her duty is to uphold honor, not for selfhood and self-respect, but to fulfill the duty laid upon her. A song that bridges the passage of time reinforces the primacy of a woman's duty. दुनिया में हम आएंगे तो जीना ही पड़ेगा, जीवन है अगर जहर तो पीना ही पड़ेगा. The essence of this stoic philosophy comes later in the song. औरत है वही औरत जिसे दुनिया की शर्म है, संसार में बस लाज ही नारी का धर्म है. Sharm and Laj are words that carry many connotations: modesty, shame, embarrassment, honor, and an inflection of self respect too. It also calls for sexual restraint. In effect, it desexualizes the woman after she has performed the duty of bearing sons. With the onerous burden laid upon Radha, the mud covered, toiling peasant we earlier see is cloaked under motherhood. The climax, where she shoots down her beloved rebellious son, is to protect the honor of a village girl he has abducted. Radha has to live with this additional guilt. Hence, the opening scene, when she releases water into the canal and at her touch, the water turns blood red. Mother India valorizes, venerates, and ultimately mythologizes Radha. An archetype dwindles into a comforting stereotype over time, like the weepy, self sacrificing mother symbolized by Nirupa Roy in her many avatars. She is Radha transplanted to an urban ghetto in Diwar in her most powerful role. Karishma Kapoor in Fiza takes on the mantle of moral conscience keeper as the older sister of a teenage brother who is converted to Islamic terrorism post the Bombay riots of 1992 and 23. The archetypal Ma for all seasons has come a long way from the deified mother to the coy, still attractive bride of the mother of the bride of Hum Aapke Hai Kaun. She is engaged in a demurely suggestive sing-off with the groom's uncle. He is an old admirer. The desexualized mother has now regained her femininity but safely encased in traditional virtues. In DDLJ, Farida Jalal as the heroine's mother urges the beleaguered daughter Simran to run away with Raj. She offers her jewelry to make this possible. She had suffered discrimination as a young girl when her brother's education took priority over hers, but the lovers want to marry with the father's blessing. Now we have a new age mother in Ka and Ki, where roles of the husband and wife are superficially reversed for a contemporary rom-com. The self-contained, sophisticated mother of the ambitious career woman asks, "Did you have sex?" It's spoken normally, similar in tone to a routine question, "Did you take your vitamins?" The couple is dating and the mother wants to know if they are sexually compatible, without in the least sounding judgmental. The film tried too hard to portray a new kind of marriage to become a box office hit. But it did show how far the Indian mother has travelled in time. The mother who triumphs over all stereotypes is Bubbly of Badhai Ho. The mature middle class homemaker, given to hosting Mata Ki Puja and housey games, becomes pregnant. Her older son is of marriageable age and has a girlfriend in tow. She is ready to face the inevitable embarrassment, but not to the extent of having an abortion. She believes it is wrong. Badhai Ho forced us to confront that parents have sex. The desexualized mother has finished her reign. The rebel has a more nuanced, relevant history. Each rebel rebels in her own way. Each battle she chooses is different. Dunyana Mane is a feminist manifesto much before feminism was a movement. Nirmala is India's first domestic guerrilla. She is an orphan tricked into marrying a widower old enough to be her father. He has 2 children older than her. Kaka Saheb is supposedly a progressive lawyer. Nirmala is aghast but not defeated. She rebels. She will not accept him as her husband, though the household and milieu are orthodox. Shantaram is at his peak as a director. He conveys her ambivalent feelings of putting on kumkum. She pauses, hand lifted, with the kumkum in her finger, and looks at her face in the mirror. She wears it finally after the hesitation. Nirmala will observe the outward trappings of wifehood, but will not accept Kaka Saheb physically or emotionally as her husband. He is decent enough not to force himself on her, but thinks she'll finally come around. Kaka Saheb's daughter is a progressive leader working for women's rights. Shantaram's casting coup was to make Shakuntala Paranjpai play the daughter. She is filmmaker Sai Paranjpai's illustrious mother, a prominent figure fighting for liberal causes. She upbraids her father for his actions. Nirmala's continuing rebellion and self-doubts about his own masculinity lead to Kaka Saheb's suicide. Shantaram uses a walking stick, a phallic symbol, and a clock ticking to remind Kaka Saheb of the inexorable passage of time. The famous scene when he sees distorted images of his own face in the fragments of a shattered mirror uses German expressionist Stowe to underline the psychological fragmentations of a man's ego. Dunyane Mane is very much part of the reform movement that swept Maharashtra. Women's empowerment through education and abolition of child marriage were high on the agenda of the movement. Nirmala's descendants find their space in parallel cinema. Woman is the focus, filter, and also a metaphor for the struggle for selfhood in an unequal society. Benegal's women, in his thematic trilogy, had the gallery of women who grow out of victimhood into awareness of injustice. The true rebel is Smita Patil's fiery Bindu of Manthan. She is suspicious of city folk, preaching to the oppressed Dalit, even as she feels the tug of mutual attraction that grows palpable between herself and the dairy specialist, Dr. Rao. But she is fiercely protective of her space. That is Bindu's tragedy. She can deny her husband physical intimacy, but is trapped in a marriage to a drunken wastrel who retaliates by poisoning her buffalo. Her wordless desolation is eloquent. There is certain dignity in her grief as she faces the double oppression of a Dalit woman, caste and patriarchy. When she sees the truth of her oppression, she is one of the leaders of change. She persuades others to join the milk cooperative. She is a rebel with a larger cause. A much later film is, of course, Mirch Masala, with the who's who of parallel cinema defining what ensemble acting means in a multi-layered, robust narrative. Ketan Mehta made a flamboyant statement of women power. Smita Patil is the fiery Sonbai who stands resolutely against a tyrannical Subedar's lust. The time is pre-independent India and the place a vibrant village in Gujarat. She repeatedly says no to the Subedar's obsessive pursuit, who sees it as a challenge to his power and masculinity. Her repeated no leads other women to stand by her for a glorious, if brief, moment of victory. The personal does become political. Mirch Masala takes an epic turn. It harks to impending historical change, while the setting is a pre-industrial village in colonized India. Now, Aparna Sen's Parama underlined that upper-class domesticity can drain a woman's identity so insidiously that she is not even aware of it. Wife, mother, Bauma, Baudi, Kakima. Where is Parama under all these identities that relationships have imposed on her? The catalyst is the arrival of a young photographer on an assignment. He decides to capture Parama's images as she is organizing the family Durga Puja. The dynamics between the two cameras, the directors, and its play with the camera within the film add a distancing layer. The affair between the outsider who probes her identity and Parama is inevitable. The family is shocked, more so by a guilt-free woman they can't recognize and slot into a familiar pigeonhole. Parama has slashed her wrists, and that seems to have set her free from the moorings that constrained her. A new consciousness of selfhood is quietly uplifting. Vinay Shukla's godmother bridged 2 centuries on the cusp of 2000. Shabana Azmi found a role that had the epic dimensions of a new Mother India. As Rambhi Bain, she transforms before our eyes from the quietly supportive wife of a community leader into an ambitious political player. It is controversially based on Santokh Bain, a female don who wielded power over her community during elections. Rambi Ben is often ruthless and confesses with relish to her loyal aide. This political game is very enjoyable. What is remarkable about the narrative is the elliptical editing that makes it very taut. Innocents are victims of violence let loose by this immoral game. She rediscovers her integrity and also the courage to act on it. The uncompromising tone of the film presages the Gujarat pogroms of 2002. For me, Indie cinema's intrepid subversion of our untouchable classics is its most remarkable achievement. Subversion of icons raises its unrepentant head at times when tradition and change clash. Subversion is no longer a covert operation. Subversives flaunt their iconoclasm with pride. The new generation of directors creates a welcoming space for women where they can be themselves, shed inhibitions to express what they want and feel. These filmmakers are fearless, convinced that classics are not holy cows. Classics can be remade on their own terms, reflecting their vision of what cinema can be when one dares to recast inherited icons. They have the quirky sensibility and audacious talent to make edgy cult films for the millennial generation. Dev D and Sahib Biwi or Gangster fit in right with the Zeitgeist, where the past is invoked as a quotation minus the nostalgia, where the present is sought to be captured in all its urgent frenzy. The classic is not treated with the reverence due to an unsurpassable landmark. Its codes and signifiers are acknowledged and reinterpreted. The result can infuriate the outraged purist and challenge the deconstructionist love affair with semiotics. Dev D and Sahib Bibi or Gangster become filmmakers' films for this generation. Anurag Kashyap's Dev D has forever changed our perception of the hallowed, rather adolescent archetype that had anyway outstayed its time. Devdas had degenerated into a literary and film cliche. The time for reinventing the characters was seized by Kashyap with disruptive glee. In Dev D, the angst-ridden hero of the classic is recast as a self-destructive egoist with a sense of entitlement. Unlike the coy Paro of the classic, Kashyap's heroine is a passionate woman who owns her desire and need for sexual gratification. She makes her own decisions and stands by them. The women Paro and Chanda in Dev D are centered and practical in contrast to the escapist Dev who is lost in his addictions. Chandramukhi, the lovelorn tawaif of the older versions, is discarded and Chanda is a determined young woman planning for a better future. She is on par with Dev, levels with him and chooses life instead. Unlike the tragic ending of the classic, the film ends on a note of hope as the relationship between Dev and Chanda burgeons on new ground. In Gurudutt's Sahib Bibi or Gulam, Meena Kumari created the unforgettably tragic heroine Choti Bahu, who longs for intimacy with her pleasure-seeking zamindari husband. Sahib Bibi or Gangster is superior pulp fiction crossed with an all-time classic, clever and contemporary with crackling dialogue and frenetic action. The focal point is the entry of Bablu, a cocky young man coming to hide in the hinterland from cops. He comes as the replacement driver who has had an accident. He is to drive the tempestuous Choti Rani around since her husband doesn't have time for her. He comes to this unnamed place where the Raja Saheb's Haveli is the landmark. Choti Rani is all fire and ice. She enjoys her drink. The cigarette in her hand is not just a style statement. Her boudoir is her private, if restricted, kingdom, where she summons the new driver to check him out. There is a fleeting image of Choti Rani's spiral-clad ankle as she sits regally on her bed holding court, a nod to the inimitable build-up to a first glimpse of Choti Bahu from her altar-decorated feet to the iconic face with her soulful gaze. There is an immediate spark between the bored, restless Rani looking for excitement and the quick witted Bablu with a knowing gleam in his eye. The stage is set for seduction. Anticipation only makes the pleasure more frantic. The narrative opts for the breakneck pace of a thriller where moves, murder plans, double and treble dub crossings are only to be expected. Dhulia wisely takes time to create the suitable setting. He captures the decaying ambience of the imposing Haveli, its peeling paint and age smudged photographs, huge rooms bereft of rich carved furniture, conveying the sense of scaled down magnificence. Decadence is not poetic anymore. Instead, its representative Aditya Pratap Singh is a lethally practical man using the royal status to win contracts in the cutthroat business of government tenders. If the Raja has his fun and games openly, Rani's affair has to be kept discreet. The stormy seduction and frenetic couplings are pretty graphic. It is revealed that Bablu is playing a deep game. He is planted in the Sahib's mansion as a temporary driver by the rival Genda Singh. A complicated plot is afoot and it goes horribly wrong. Bablu is shot dead, Raja Sahib is shot and survives. The plot unravels to Choti Rani's advantage. Bablu has the naked hunger of the social climber. But what he doesn't know is his place in the Rani's scheme of things. For her, sexual gratification is temporary, class loyalty is permanent. Bablu was only for her bedroom. In public, she is the Rani. Dhulia's preoccupation with violent action and intrigue does lead to confused unfolding and denouement. The denouement may be weak, but the postscript is brilliant in the surprise it springs. Choti Rani is truly a big game player for all her volatility and mood swings. She sees opportunity and grasps it before anyone can snatch it away. After the shootout, it is election time. Choti Rani is in charge now, waving regally to her praja from the terrace. She wheels out Raja Sahib in his chair, lifting his hand for the obligatory wave. She now has him doing her bidding, payback time for all the subtle and not so subtle humiliations she has endured. Rani emerges the winner, holding all the aces, or she stakes her claim in the Game of Thrones. Unlike Choti Bahu, Choti Rani escapes being a victim. Finally, to Vishal Bharadwaj's two masterpieces. Maqbool and Haider are reinterpretations of Shakespeare's Macbeth and Hamlet and have produced complex women protagonists. Nimi, Lady Macbeth's counterpart, is a young, sensuous and ambitious mistress of the underworld patriarch Abaji. She woos Maqbool and participates in the blood crime to fulfill her ambition. In a country that deifies mothers and motherhood, Haider was almost blasphemous for making Ghazala sensuous and playful. She almost displaces the eponymous hero from center stage. It's intriguing how and why Bharadwaj departs so drastically from Shakespeare. Haider is not only brave in its setting, Bharadwaj's version of Hamlet is rooted in deeply troubled Kashmir, where an alienated people want autonomy. Azadi is a far, forlorn cry. Ghazala's enlarged role makes you wonder, did Vishal Bharadwaj read T.S. Eliot's seminal essay on Hamlet in his critical collection, The Sacred Wood? All this is pure speculation, of course. Ghazala's centrality in the dramatic and emotional tone of the narrative justifies the reference to Eliot's influential critique that drove generations of English literature students to wrestle with this critical puzzle. T.S. Eliot, as formidable a critic as he was an iconic poet of classical modernism, Eliot pronounced Hamlet an artistic failure because the intractable material failed to find its objective correlative. The revenge motive and Hamlet's notorious inability to act for a variety of psychological and ethical reasons are complicated by the additional difficulty of dealing with the effect of a mother's guilt upon her son. Hamlet is disgusted when he sees Gertrude happy with his uncle she married in unseemly haste. Eliot finds a problem with Hamlet's excessive abhorrence and Gertrude's placidity. The crux of the problem is that Gertrude is a wishy-washy woman who is simply unable to sustain the level of Hamlet's disgust, an emotion that he is unable to come to terms with. Now cut to Haidar. As a political narrative, it enlarges the individual tragedy into the collective tragedy of a people denied full autonomy. Haidar is the protagonist, yet he is not always central. That place is slowly taken up by Ghazala, tender, sensual, imperious, grieving and finally decisive, who is flirting gaily with her slightly drunken, slightly comical yet sinister brother-in-law within weeks of her idealistic husband's disappearance. The undertone of the Oedipal complex in the play is a given. Haidar's antic disguise of feigned madness is paralleled by Ghazala's deepening introspection of how she has damaged the son she loves so much. So it is for her to intervene and atone for the wrong she has done. Unwittingly perhaps, but she is more sensitive than the placid queen given to shallow lamentations. In that sense, Bharadwaj restores dramatic equilibrium, finding the objective correlative for a film where the personal does become truly political. Hamlet's damning disgust is answered by the willing martyrdom of a suicide bomber that Ghazala opts for, to pay with her too sullied flesh, a fitting flaming end that echoes the violent bomb blasts of contemporary times, unlike death by poison. Tabu's Ghazala demands understanding, if not empathy. She is tragically widowed, accidentally or by design is left ambiguous. We see a beautiful, mature woman who makes no apologies for fulfilling her needs, emotional and sexual. Widow remarriage in the context of Kashmir and its Muslim population is acceptable, unlike in a conservative Hindu setting. It is when Ghazala sees how irreparably she has damaged her darling son that she rouses herself from languorous indulgence. Tabu transforms her body language from luxurious lassitude to purposeful action. She invigorates the narrative with an almost feral female flair. Haidar's tragedy is as much as Ghazala's in Bharadwaj's brilliant film. The grandeur of tragedy is not for women in our cinema. Choti Bahu is the only other tragic figure in Hindi cinema, but she fades away into death and oblivion. Ghazala opts for a fiery, blazing death to incinerate her sins of omission and commission. Okay, now bye.